Oh, you homeschooled too?
Yeah.
Wowzers.
Great.
Homeschooled alongside running your own.
Yeah.
Wow, you were very busy.
Yeah, and like had a sliding glass door on my law office, and I tell my daughter now, who's also a tax lawyer in my office, that she would come to the door and bang on the door. It was very embarrassing. My clients, but I mean, do anything to do.
Matt Woolley Podcast.
Our guest today is Brenda Vassaur Taylor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. Okay, so who is Brenda Vassaur Taylor? As we always start this podcast, I give a little bit of history. Brenda Vassaur Taylor is a widow and mother. She is a Baylor University graduate, University of Arkansas School of Law graduate, an SMU tax law graduate, owner and attorney of the law office of Brenda Vassaur Taylor, owner of Private Client Services Group, owner of Farmland Strategies, and also co-owner of Conduit News and Conduit for Commerce. Did I miss anything?
Well, a few entities, but that's okay.
We're just going to let it roll?
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay, so Brenda, let's let the audience know, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Jefferson County,
Mm-hmm.
halfway between...
Are you serious? I didn't know that. I've known you all these years. So for clarity, before we get off into it, I've known Brenda for years. I didn't realize you were Jefferson County.
Oh, yeah.
What in the world? Okay, I knew it
for 44 years and didn't want to leave.
Really? Okay, get off into it. Let's do it.
Grew up and lived for a big part of my marriage, halfway between Altamar and Wabaseka. I don't want to brag and say I'm from Altamar.
Right. You don't want to think you're uppity.
Exactly. So, country girl.
Okay.
And, father was a cotton farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Husband was a rice farmer.
Okay.
Raised my children for the most part on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And went straight through school, the schools you've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And studied and got my degree and started to work.
Well, let's take a step back real quick.
Okay.
So you're a farm girl. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on what the life of a farm girl looks like?
I can, and it was growing up probably different than my friends who were also, raised on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, it takes a lot of energy and time for your children to work. The reality is, and he did not see me working outside. So I was, learned all the skills that women learned at that time. I could sew. As a matter of fact, I taught home ec in the 8th grade to my class when my teacher took a maternity leave. So
That's
I was
awesome.
quite the seamstress, still professional.
So you were a take charge lady from the beginning.
Cook, clean. I don't know about the cleaning part, but I knew how. But I never worked outside the home.
Okay.
So it was that can be a negative, in life when you're, you go to college. I got a degree in accounting at Baylor, and had never had a job.
Oh, wow.
In my last, I guess, junior year of college, my brother had moved in with me. He'd come in from the Army. He was 4.5 years older, and he decided I needed to work. And so I worked at Target as a click girl. I tore off the little tags, and made a stack and turned them in. It was quite exhausting.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what made you decide, coming from where you come from, what was a deciding factor to push yourself into, law and tax law? I mean, where did that come from? I mean, what was your guiding force for that, or was there?
Well, there was. My dad was, he was a farmer. We were middle class. We certainly weren't what would be considered in that county poor, but we were not the wealthy, elite plantation owners. But he was a farmer. He was self-employed, and when he looked at our future, there was no choice but college. And so I had an older brother, 4.5 years younger sister by 6 years. And he really was, had goals for my brother. And he kept telling him, you've got to have a career. You've got to be able to make a good living, and college is the ticket. My dad and mother did not go to college. And, they had lived through the Depression. And so my mother's big thing was for me to be able to support myself if something happened and I'd gotten married and something happened to my husband. You've got to be able to make a living. Now, my mother never worked outside the home except on occasion. It was really more irritation to my dad than really, producing an income. She's always saying this, but yet, she had a man who never let her down financially.
Do you think she did that because maybe that was something she was,
that's what the irony was. She never had any time when he didn't make her a really a good living. Now, we were farming, and that's a high-risk occupation. It's like being married to a gambler in the kind of farming we were doing. You roll the dice every year, and so my dad leased most of the acreage that he farmed. Row crop farming, not like farming in northwest Arkansas. This was, like a several thousand acre tract or something, and a lot of risk because you couldn't control the prices, you couldn't control the prices for your crop, you can't control.
Had to have a lot of faith.
You can't control the weather. And faith. You might have faith, but God may have other plans. Yeah. And so, that was a hard life, but I didn't know any different. I thought that was good, and so that's why when I chose my career and then husband, the rule was I don't want to live any further than a mile from my parents. I mean, really, Brenda? I love the farm life.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be, for whatever reason, at least that's my experience in the rural areas. It is a blessing to have so much family close by, and I didn't really recognize the benefit of that until I came up here because I am from that area. I'm from Cleveland County, which is just right next to Jefferson County. It's a place called Woodlawn, which is
Woodlawn's just south of.
That's it. 20 minutes south, in between basically Pine Bluff and Warren. It's kind of in the middle. It's a rural wooded community, which I wouldn't take back my existence for anything. I loved, the area. And don't get me wrong, Northwest Arkansas is my home now. I've been here since 2002. Things are just different down there. But you can compare and contrast. Yeah, there's a lot of amenities and a lot of wonderful things up here, a lot of great place to have a business. But, I do miss that kinship of being close to family. I tell people all the time, I'm kind of, compared to other people I know, they have family. It's no big deal to have family 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours away. I literally grew up with my family being both sides of the family within 5 minutes, which it's a blessing, and I'm grateful for that blessing. But enough about me, Brenda. Let's get back on you. So you grew up and it developed into a farm family, and you wanted to better yourself, and you wanted that independence. You wanted to be, So what I'm assuming it was just a natural transition for you to go to Little Rock because it's just.
Well, it was sort of interesting that I started out with the university here in Northwest Arkansas. Did not have friends who also went.
So you started here?
I started here my freshman year.
I did not know that.
Actually went a year here and then a year to Ouachita. My dad said because of my brother who transferred every semester, you have to stay a year everywhere, And really, my dad focused on my brother was his focus, And so I sort of learned everything by the mistakes that I saw my dad not like that my brother did. So my brother did go to Baylor, and I joined him there, and ended up. Finally, I was at home college-wise. I had a lot in common with the people there. I had grown up Southern Methodist, and really, really enjoyed the Baylor mentality, and it was a great accounting business school. It still is, and as a matter of fact, my oldest son also got an accounting degree from Baylor. So that was a nice family tradition that we started. But I was really looking for a degree, not really thinking, I'm going to do this or that. I was good in certain things, but I wanted something where I could make some money. I just wanted an income that I could control rather than waiting on the rain or whatever, And so after I could see the end coming on accounting, did some interviews, knew I was going to get my CPA and thought I'm going to go ahead and get my master's in business. So I was looking at various schools all over the United States And I thought, that's a 2-year program. The programs I was looking at, and law school's 3 years. I mean, what a way to make a decision about the law. So I said, law school, master's in business, law school. I mean, it was that kind of ridiculous decision. And as it turned out, I decided my last semester at accounting, I liked people more than I liked numbers. Even though I was probably pretty good at numbers. And went that accounting and then tax. My mother, she's saying, okay, you finished your 3 years of law school. You've got your, and what's funny, I was thinking about that inside of this interview. And I thought, the week that I turned 25, I got the results for my CPA exam and the bar exam, that I had passed both of those. And so
what a great week.
And my mother goes, yeah, it was. She goes, okay, now, I agree with you, Brenda. You need to get your tax law degree. That's going to set you apart because you're going to go into a world of men. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time that I entered my career, it was a world of men. Mm-hmm. And so I was the first woman hired in Pine Bluff in a law firm to practice law.
What was the law firm?
The Bridges firm. They were a conservative group of men, been around 100 years. And, it was quite a risk for them to hire me, actually. They didn't think, and one of the secretaries tells me later, the guys said that the only reason they were willing to hire you is as a tax attorney, you wouldn't be going to the courtroom.
Wow.
I later told some of the senior partners that they totally denied it. They said they did not know what I was talking about. That was funny, but it was,
was it a struggle for you? Was it kind of working in that area? Was it kind of I wouldn't call it a culture shock, but was it shocking to clientele to see you doing your thing? Or
well, it was different. I was later on.
Did you have any struggles with that? With clients?
I had a friend, for example, a friend in my accounting class at Baylor he's from Georgia. And he said, Brenda, knowing your personality, I know that you've got these big plans. You're going to be this big professional person. But, you're not going to be able to be a mother and a wife, and I see you in that role. How are you going to do that? And I said, really, Reuben? I mean, move over and let me show you how to do this. And, maybe I did wipe the floor with him a few times. But, still, I had a career goal and I wanted to advance. I mean, I did understand early on, before law school, my brother taught me this. Mm-hmm. Guys have a lot more fun than girls. I thought that was what, that was my world. Maybe because, they're out on the tractor or whatever. I don't know, but it was obvious they had more fun. So I wanted to go do what they were doing. Not that I went to law school to be a guy, but, I had all guy friends in law school and we had fun. I mean, I went to the,
what were the percentage of female men in that, would you say?
I went to Little Rock because it was close to home and I had enough of being away from home.
Yeah.
So I, at that time, it was the first day class of that law school. Mm-hmm. And these 40-year-old women had been sitting around waiting on that law school to open up for the day because they were raising their children. And some of the most prestigious women graduates were in my class. And so we had several. I mean, it's probably maybe 20% or maybe 30% at that time. It was an exceptionally large group of women. Yeah. They were older than me. I probably had more in common with the guys, and but it was fun. I liked it. But we would go out together, and this is just to tell you my personality. We'd go out together, and we'd get to the door of the bar or whatever we're going to go in, and I'm standing there waiting on them to open the door, and I don't go in until they do. So it was sort of ironic.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so at what point did you meet your husband? Because how did you so you're on this career path, but then you marry a farmer?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I told him the only reason I was willing to marry him was because he promised not to move past a mile beyond my parents. Isn't that crazy? Especially since it was
and he agreed to
it. He did. He agreed to it. He had moved to that area from Forest City, of all places, which has a lot in common with Pine Bluff in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
And his focus was Memphis and the east, where ours was Texas and west, where we lived in the part of the state. And but he was farming and he had a nice degree, and he was a nice football, baseball player, and a handsome guy, and anyhow, men just have a way of hanging on to you. They don't let go. Like saying, you have 40 kids.
That's awesome. Okay, so you guys started a life together. What was early, because this is pre-Northwest Arkansas, right? So talk a little bit about that.
Well, as I knew that I was going to, when you get out of law school or when you graduate with a professional degree, you're very anxious to get a job, right? That's sort of the mark of what was all this worth, for, and did I do a good job or not? It's sort of like, am I going to pass this test? And so I apply to, take send out job applications, that kind of thing. But, how many jobs are there in Pine Bluff and Stuttgart? Because I wanted to stay in that area. Yeah. And I didn't even know attorneys. This is what was so bizarre. It wasn't like I had a family full of attorneys to pattern after. This was a new path for my individual family's background. And so I interviewed with this one lawyer who had just, he had a family. His dad was a lawyer. His cousins were, cousin's a big attorney in the whole state. He's probably still practicing. And he tells me, though, he says, I know you're engaged, because by that time I had dated my husband through law school, and I kept promising we'll get married, as soon as I finish this next, level. And so I knew I planned to marry him before I was finished with the tax degree, but in between the law school and tax law. And so the employer attorney says to me, now you've got to understand that as a partner, because I was asking him, what would it look like for me to become partner, that kind of thing. I would really be making your husband a partner rather than you.
What?
Exactly. Now, that guy is he was an interesting personality, and everyone knew that. And he was the first Republican elected, the first person elected as a Republican, as a U.S. Congressman. J. Dickey is who that was.
Is that right?
He gave me a test, the secretary's test from J.C. Penney's. Now, I'm telling you that not to trash him, but to tell you what kind of personality I had. I was not offended because, I'm pretty much women's liber. I mean, I'm going to go and, do what I can do to show this guy I can make better than you on a test, and have done that many times. But, I don't get offended by men being, men. And, Jay wants to be stupid, I'll let him. So it turns out that the Bridges firm that I went to work for find out that I'm available for the next. My dad farmed, and he had a good friend related to the firm, and he's, Brenda, you need to go to work for them. And I applied, and they hired me, quickly. And I told Jay, and Jay said, well, I knew if you were any good, you'd be, snatched out from under me during that time. So I did that. And so I was married by the time that I went into the practice of law. And I worked later on. The lawyers who hired me, they were wonderful men, learned a lot. They told me that, one told me in particular, Brenda, when you came here, you were like a chalkboard, totally erased with nothing on it. And I remember, I've had one job experience in my life. He's so funny to look back on. Yeah. And then they told me, we do regret how we progressed you through the firm, because they started a new rule when I started practicing. They hired me as a tax lawyer. They had a tax department. There was not a lot of tax lawyers across the state. And our firm was one of the better tax lawyers in the entire state. Okay. We had, really good. And so I was honored to be able to be taught by these guys, and thought it was a great opportunity, which it was. But they said, we've started a new rule. We want our young lawyers, even though you're being hired as a tax lawyer, to learn all areas of law the first year. Oh, wow. So we're going to expose you to everything. And so...
Was that a disaster?
Oh, it was wonderful. I learned how to practice law.
That's awesome.
And, and did tax law at the same time. The year after that, they hired a guy who's a lawyer here in Northwest Arkansas, Lee Moore, a year behind me. Lee was the same age, but he took a year off, or a little slower than me. Like I said, I passed him right by, right? I didn't know Lee was from Rising. But anyhow, yeah, they changed the rule back. Suddenly, all Lee's going to go straight into tax and not learn the law. Well, lo and behold, a few years later, we realized Lee doesn't know how to practice law, but Brenda does. thought it was kind of funny. And the reason that was helpful, not that he's not a good tax lawyer, he is, but it was helpful for me because I made some decisions along the way in that career. I was 7 years with that law firm, and I was new. I was plowing new ground in my time period. There weren't many women who had children who, certainly to take a career path like I did, surely you're not going to ruin it with children. I mean, what would we do with children? And so there was no one to ask those kinds of questions. I can remember making a phone call to Hillary Rodham at that time.
Oh, wow.
As I was expecting my first child at the, lawyer at the firm, and I'm calling, and the guys couldn't help me. They didn't know what to tell me.
What law firm was that?
Bridges.
That's right. That's
so I'm trying to figure out what last name to give my son, because I did not use my husband's last name at that time. I was just Brenda Vassaur. And that, looking back, how hilarious. I'm calling Hillary Rodham at that time, ask her how she decided to name Chelsea Clinton.
You really did it?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's just nobody. She was just any old body at that time. She was a lawyer in the state.
Yeah.
And anyhow, she might have been the wife of the governor, but I didn't care. I want to know the answer to this. And she said, oh, well, I gave her my husband's last name because that's what I had. I had my dad's last name. So, I thought it was appropriate. Now, that makes sense. And now looking back, how, what was wrong with me? What was I thinking? And anyhow, that was funny. So after Coleman's my oldest son, after he was a year old or 2 years old, I have another child. And, the guys at the law firm are going, we barely survived one, but how can we take the breast milk in the refrigerator for another one? They had never, ever seen anything like that.
You were breaking ground in all areas.
They were so scarred by it. They didn't hire another woman for about 20 years.
Wow.
But anyhow, I laugh about that. But I did end up leaving the law firm at my preference. I had gone after the second child was born. I'd been there 7 years, and he was a year old. My second son, a year old. It was the hardest decision at that time that I had ever made in my life, and that was to leave that law practice and go home.
What stimulated that, though?
I would lay in bed at night thinking about how many hours I was away from those two sons, and I just could not handle being away from them that much. I was fortunate in that I had a lady staying at my house with them. They loved her. She was precious. She stayed with us through until we moved. It was terrible when she couldn't move with us, for all four of my children. But so, I really had it made as far as working. But something in me, I just needed to be home. And so when I left my full-time law practice, and I always say, I brought it home, and I was one of the first personal computers. Shows you how old I am. The first people I knew of to have their own personal computer. We had a secretary. We would dictate, they would do everything. And when I started doing it myself, because I'm home with my own office, office, isn't that amazing now? That's just like regular business to have your office at home. But then it was not. And I found out, well, I've gotten this letter done a lot more, a lot faster doing it myself, which was sort of a surprise. But anyhow, so that, I did that. And sometimes I would work 12 hours a week and sometimes 60 hours a week. So I maintained my own personal practice. But then it was just my law practice. And so I ended up, we ended up having two more children. And, I homeschooled them, and it was the best days of our lives.
That's awesome. How long did you homeschool?
It was probably a span of about 12 years.
Okay.
And my oldest son went to first grade. So the second one's 2 years younger, and as he's going into kindergarten, 5-year-old kindergarten is when I started homeschooling, when I'd left the law firm. And
you homeschooled too?
Yeah.
Wowzers.
Great.
Yeah. Homeschooled alongside running your own.
Yeah.
Wow, you were very busy.
Yeah, and had a sliding glass door on my law office, and I tell my daughter now, who's also a tax lawyer in my office, that she would come to the door and bang on the door. It was very embarrassing. My clients might do what he could do.
That's awesome.
So my sons and my daughter were able to grow up on the farm for a good part of their lives, and I'm sad for children now. I'm sad for their children who don't have that kind of. Who knows what a mud puddle looks like? And worms and baby birds falling out of trees and watching kittens.
Have you ever seen any of the studies, speaking of which, of where they talk about the immune systems are much more, the immune systems are very strong in children that are basically raised in situations like that, and compared to rural babies and rural toddlers and young children have a lot. I'm not scientific, nor am I smart, but their immune systems are extremely strong in comparison to those that are not in those situations. And it's because, I'm telling everybody, it's because you've never, tried to eat a mud pie.
You may have something. Yeah. My children were never in a daycare or setting like that. And then we homeschooled until, my daughter, third child, was in the 5th grade. My youngest child was in the 2nd grade. So, they went to public school for a short period during that time. And oldest two were 7th and 9th graders. And so, they were, I always find it interesting when people talk about your children not being socialized. Well, my word, my kids could talk to any adult as well as they could kids. And they certainly, they
don't have a problem.
Yeah, you've all four of them working in the office now. It's great. We're still together.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
That's great. So how long did this? So you said you did this for 12 years. So put us in the spot. So these 12 years have passed. What's the next step? Is that when y'all came up here, or what was it?
We had a short stint in the western part of the state where my husband was getting out of farming.
Okay.
And the idea of a farmer getting out of farming is, cattle. Really? Okay. Wow. So I started a full-time law practice.
Okay.
With my kids in public school.
Okay.
And so they had a taste of the.
What area of the
school.
state was it?
This was Mena.
Mena. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was almost 5 years experience. It was very different than the rest of our statewide experience. Uh-huh. We had, we were doing things like Christian Heritage Week at the Capitol. I mean, during my homeschool days, it was great. Got Mike Huckabee as lieutenant governor involved, and had Tim Hutchinson, who was our U.S. senator at that time, and, had a presidential candidate come speak. So I've always kind of been, a little bit of a lightning rod, as I was told by the school principal at the public school. When the Supreme Court had ruled that you can't pray in class, I said, well, this is not really what that opinion says. If we read it here, it says this, And anyhow, so...
we'll get off in a second. Let's take a real quick pit stop, and then we'll come back to that. So I'm seeing a reoccurring theme with your involvement in law as well as politics. Okay. So from the story I'm hearing so far, you, whether intentionally or not, you've name dropped several people that you have had exposure to that you are speaking very candidly of. So was that a natural thing, just being in the Little Rock area and being exposed to all these people that have made a name for themselves in politics, or was that?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm not looking for names.
No, I'm not saying that. Well, that's what I'm saying. It just so happens. I'm not accusing you of name dropping. I'm saying like you're naming people that have a lot of Arkansas. Yes, it is. Arkansas politics. All of those names, and so have you always had an interest in politics, or is it?
I went to law school.
I understand. So, but I know some people that aren't.
So I don't know. I wanted to make money, so I become a lawyer.
Right.
I can determine how much I'm going to make, and how much I work, and I'm not waiting on a rain or anything like that. That's the career path. And so then I decide I'm going to leave it all to my husband with no rain to make us a living, which was quite. I'm still working a little bit on the side, but mostly focusing on our 4 children. And that was a big deal. And like I said, the hardest decision I've ever made. Now, I had law school behind me, remember, 4 years being taught the law. And so when I decided I was going to homeschool my children, I was going to teach them. I wasn't sure I was capable. I never taught anybody to read. I barely learned to read myself. I didn't know how to teach myself. But I started teaching them things that, and homeschooling was not just the legislature just didn't say, here, go and be well-fed and homeschool. I found out when I said, I've never heard of that, but I think it's a good idea, I'm going to do it. I realized there was a political involvement that the legislature, no, we don't want to have homeschooling in this state. And the educational, industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, we don't want homeschooling. So I don't like people telling me I can't do something when I just looking around nationally and find out what a good thing that is. And so it was really when I started teaching my children and deciding what I wanted to teach them. And I decided I wanted to teach them. I did not want other people deciding what to teach them. Okay. And so that led me down a path of studying history because I always thought history was boring.
Really?
I did, very much so. I thought a lot of things were boring that, later on I learned,
this is very important.
Your teacher makes a lot of difference as to what
100%.
And so as I'm studying history and the country's history, I'm learning, I didn't know that about the Constitution. Well, I had a whole year of con law. I never even learned that, And as I go into that, you start seeing life a little bit different. And I had gotten involved with, I was very concerned about, I'm very pro-life. And, I'm a Christian. And so is...
Me too.
Yeah. And I started, this is probably the biggest change in my life, all the things that I've described, is the year that I left my law practice, left the law firm to come home and be with my children more. I started a Bible study at that time. And I had been in church every Sunday, at night. My father was chairman of the deacons, grew up Southern Baptist. 21 years old, we changed and start going to the United Methodist Church. They're so happy to have young people. They elect me lay leader. I'm sitting there in this little country church. My family, added to it. We maybe got the average age down to 60. That was with all my kids and everybody. So a few of us. But anyhow, so I started a Bible study fellowship, and reading the Bible at the same time that I was teaching my children. It opened up a lot of different things to me, and I've always thought it really increased my IQ probably 30%. Now, where's that going to go on your podcast? The study of the Bible. I mean,
you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people that we have on here, which I make no mistake. I'm not afraid to have the Christian label. I wear it proudly, even on my LinkedIn. And a lot of the people that we have on here. I would say 95% of them are Christians. It's just a matter of actually asking people. You don't know unless you don't ask, which you volunteered it, which is great. But this podcast is 120% on board with that. So you keep on keeping on.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I probably knew that about you already, but that I would say that it increased my IQ by 30%. I don't know how often you hear that.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's historically, and I won't get on one of my soapboxes, but, my recommendation to anybody that asks, and sometimes to those that don't, the Bible, even if you wanted to take, which I don't recommend you do this, but even if you wanted to take God out of the midst, like if you just saying, which you can't do in the Bible, but the Bible has timeless knowledge in it that will help anyone. And that's what was God's design for it. But I believe even if you're an atheist, there are principles in the Bible, 100%, that are just great for a healthy life if you just want to look at it as a self-help book. And now, that's not how I take it, and that's not how I profess it, but God put a lot of great truths and great guidance in the Bible. And now, obviously, it's important that, I'll say this, 120%, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And I don't know, I tell many people and in business, I don't know how people do it without God. So to those that are listening, I hope that you know Jesus Christ as your Savior. And I recommend picking up the Bible because, there are so many times that if it wasn't for God's Word, I wouldn't have had guidance, and I wouldn't have had the right attitude, and I wouldn't have had the perseverance that, helped me get through tough situations, both personally and professionally. And so when you say, I believe that it increased your IQ. I 100% agree.
Yeah, there's a way, I guess a person could hear that, but and it is sort of.
And if you don't like it, well, that's just, that's on you. But I'm telling you, give Jesus a chance, people.
Well, like I said, I'd been in church every Sunday, but learning the Bible for myself, the Scripture, really going through it, and learning it in detail, like I was able to do, and I think back, I did not leave my law practice and full-time job to do that, but I've often wondered, would I have had that time to invest at that point in my life if I had a full-time career, full-time family, all those full-time things, which I still did, but and maybe it's just, allocating your time. I lost my father during that time. Like I told you, I'd moved to a mile from their home, to be close to my parents, and then God takes him. And so it changed, my life and my life perspective. But at any rate, you're asking, how did the political piece come in? So I start studying these different things, learning what's going on in the entire country. Maybe I had always kind of had a tendency to do that. I've found out or been reminded by my brother, my dad was like that, even though, I really wasn't conscious of it. He was, of course, a big Democrat, but anyhow, he did vote for Nixon secretly. That's funny. Because I was voting for Nixon.
Did you know that he was one of the, historically, I learned this the other day now, let me say before I open my mouth, that I haven't looked this up to be true. I haven't researched this, but I saw a thing that was talking about as far as widespread. He was one of the most popular presidents of the time, by a landslide.
Yeah, 72%.
That's crazy.
Vote in the last election.
I did not know that.
So when I went to law school, he had just, we were having Watergate. I would go home after school and watch the hearings. And of course, my class, Women's Lib was really big at that time. And so a lot of the people in our class were, and still are, have different views than I do as a conservative. But, then I just pretty much watched and, no big deal. But I remember how much they hated Nixon. And now we've got all kinds of things that have come out, about Watergate. My kids, okay, so they're now, 40 years old down to 33, and they don't believe anything. And so I tell them, well, they don't believe anything that comes out in the media and what's happened in the history of our country. And
that's why I like them so much.
Of course. and so I tell them, I said, I'm on board with, 9/11 didn't happen and all these things. I'm understanding where you're coming from. There's one thing you can believe, and that's that Bible. And so you said, it's good for anybody. Well, if it's really written by God and he knows man, it's going to help any man. But, on to the next thing. How did the political piece fit in? I don't know. I'm trying to, I start listening to Christian radio, to Jim Dobson, How to Raise My Children. And you hear this lady on Christian Heritage Week, and I'm thinking, that's a good thing to teach my kids. And then I think, really, that's a good thing to take into the public school. And so, here I am with 3 people at my little Wabasika church, and I go, hey, let's go do Christian Heritage Week. And they're going, okay. Well, wait until everybody's showing up. No, this is it. We're it. So we take it to the Capitol, and, Tim Hutchinson, state U.S. senator at that time, and we had, just a governor who was not willing to sign the
Which governor was
proclamation, Jim Guy Tucker. His office laughed. I said, would you sign my proclamation for Arkansas to celebrate Christian Heritage Week? Absolutely not.
Oh, Jim Guy Tucker.
So I'll wait until he's out of town. You know what the law was then. The lieutenant governor becomes the governor. So when Mike Huckabee becomes governor, I see him. I said, would you sign my proclamation? Sure. We're nothing at some seminar or something. We're very low key in Oark, Arkansas, on top of some hill. I'm schooling him in. And be careful what you go to, Mike. And so he signs my proclamation as he's governor that day. And so the press goes crazy because they find out that we knew it. We knew he was going to cram his religion down our throat. And sure enough, as soon as he's governor, that's what, for one day, first thing he does is sign that
that's awesome.
Proclamation.
Did he? Do you think he knew what he was doing when he did it?
No. It exploded into a firestorm. I mean, we had letters to the editor for 6 months.
Wow.
Robert Lewis, a pastor, very wonderful pastor in Fellowship Bible Church at Little Rock, he came. I mean, I had all these people at the Capitol. How did I do? I don't know. I figured you can do anything. Anything's possible.
Yeah.
And so we just did it. And we had this big event at the Capitol for the deal. And then he said to me after, he said, why have there been such a clamoring for this? Why so much attention? Why is it so supported statewide? And why is Mike suddenly this hero? I said, people are looking for a leader. Not that I'm so profound, but Robert was trying to get a handle on what's going on. What are all these voters responding to? And I don't think much has changed.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way of putting that.
I just kind of think, oh, this is a good idea, and I go do that.
That's awesome.
I don't know.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk.
No, that was during my homeschool days.
I got you.
Okay.
I'm with you. So let's talk transition to Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
So what stimulated the transfer to Northwest Arkansas? And how long have you been up here officially?
Since 2003, just a year.
Okay.
Okay.
21
years?
Yeah.
Shocking?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
No, it's more than that, isn't it?
Is it?
No, it's not. I'm bad at math.
2024?
I'm bad at math. Sorry, I'm thinking of myself.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's crazy.
Been here, what?
Yeah.
22 years?
22 years. It's. I have to sit back. You remember? I remember, thinking like when somebody says 10 years ago, I used to think the 90s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. And so now it's like I really have to take a step back. Yeah. I really have to take a step back. Okay, so you came up here in 2003. What stimulated that move?
Well, it was pretty obvious that my children were, growing up. Coleman had already gone to college. Mm-hmm. The second son was going to college, and I had my second son is the only one who's not really employed in my employment or with my companies in our office. He works for a national farm management company. He'd been with John Hancock for a number of years. So we still have that farm piece, and he's part of that. But he's the number two son. And his claim to fame is he's not a lawyer, okay? I have two lawyers in the CBA office. And so the second son's claim is he's not an attorney. So, he was always on a different path. And my oldest son graduated from Baylor in 3 years. And so I had made sure these kids have been homeschooled, and so they weren't allowed to just sit around and, whatever.
Yeah.
And
get after it.
Yeah. He wanted to go to the university for college, and I said that would be a disaster. And you get, 30 hours of college behind you while you're in high school, then I'll agree to it. And so he got 32 hours of disappointment. And so he
Good for him.
Yeah, he was allowed to come up here. And so looking around, seeing that my kids are leaving home, and I need to be able to, we need to go somewhere where we can make a good living, and Northwest Arkansas was it. And so I followed that second son here. That's what I'm getting at with the poor second son. That's awesome. His luck. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so I totally see that move, and 100%. Like, and there's no, again, I love Southern Arkansas, and I love Southern Arkansas folks. And there's nothing like the good people of Southern Arkansas. But I realized early on the opportunity. I knew that opportunity was limited, and it is. It just is. It's just part of the area. When you have people that are waiting 10, 15 years for that next promotion because there's nowhere else to go other than that promotion, so they stick with it. And I saw moving up here as an opportunity to, at the time I was in banking, and
at Simmons?
I was at Simmons. Yeah. Simmons, shout out to Simmons First National Bank, where putting you first is their business. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah. I was first in their business a long time.
And I still do business with Simmons. There's a song, Simmons. Shout out to Simmons and First Security Bank. I love both organizations. But anyways, I realized that the opportunity was limited, and I came up here for a visit. And there were several reasons why I decided to come up here, but I remember cresting that hill. And it's right around Greenland. Well, all of a sudden you come over that hill and then you saw the lay of the land of Fayetteville, and just something, for whatever reason, it just struck a chord in me, and I knew that this was the move. And little did I know that, at least in my opinion, I had come to the land of milk and honey, because there's so much opportunity up here. And you've got, the university, you've got Walmart, you've got Tyson, you've got George's, you've got J.B. Hunt, all of these big names just clustered. And, and at the time, anybody that lives here now, they don't realize, what a hidden gem it was at that time. Because there was a time when it was just like this booming area that's still a hidden gem. The word's out now, but I could totally see the success move, because I tell everybody all the time whenever, nationally, whenever local economies are like doing this, Northwest Arkansas is just barely puddling along, strong in a strong sense. There's no financial friction up here compared to other areas. But anyways, I digress. So obviously it was a success for you to move up here because of all the different areas that you have expanded into. So let's talk about that. Obviously, you have your law firm set up in place. I do want to get into. We do need to. We've got time, Brenda. We're gonna push this one. So let's first talk about. Your law firm. So what do you do on a normal basis? Give me a normal week, top level. What does Brenda and her law firm do for the residents of Northwest Arkansas?
In our law practice, when I first started practicing law, tax was the focus, tax law, and low man on the totem pole might get some of the tax that not necessarily all tax lawyers enjoy. So, those were called deferred comp plans. Pension plans. You get over there and audit them, really. But anyhow, I learned pretty quick from that other year, the first year of exposed to everything, that I really enjoyed solving problems that people had. But, in my law practice, as we focused on when we moved to the western edge of the state, I had a practice where I could go any direction that I wanted to. But I made a decision to focus. I was only going to do estate planning. I would not do family law at all. And really estate planning along with tax planning, business planning, that kind of focus, transactional. And I ended up traveling over a third of the state to do seminars, these trust will replacement vehicle using the trust was relatively new at that time. And so I would do seminars presenting that and brought that practice up here. And so I brought with me clients that I'd had a long time, Jefferson County and other places across the state. And so when I, might have a intern or another lawyer working with me or whatever with the firm, but then I have these children who had grown up and in that practice, I never said, I've got this law practice that I want you to be part of. That was never my plan.
It just organically happened.
It organically happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so Coleman naturally, after law school, starts to work with me. Then Isabel, after she gets her tax degree, she starts working with us. And Samuel, he got his CPA. He's a CPA with the firm. But what it does is give us an opportunity to attract the kind of clients. I made a comment today on a program that, they're talking about, can somebody find a lawyer to do that kind of work? Lawyers do all kinds of work, but lawyers and clients usually match. So I attract clients like myself or, and vice versa. And so the goal for me would be to have a client that I could make their life better as far as their estate plan, their children, how they could get sick, die tomorrow. They have an idea of what their family's facing. They've left them with a plan to move forward, either with the assets, with the business, whatever. But in the meantime, what has your business been run like? How can we improve that? I mean, it might be some people thinking about selling it in 5 years. You want to get it to a certain level. Or I have clients call and come in, I want to sell my business. And I've had two fairly recently who we would talk about want to sell the business, and my two other, I call them partners or kids or whatever they want. They call me Brenda. I haven't heard of Mama and so on. I would not even answer to it. But, these clients are talking about selling their business, and by the time I go through everything, they would be insane to sell their business. And so one ended up selling in about 3 years after that. The other one calls me about every 6 months thanking me for talking him out of doing that. That's so, awesome. You field calls. I also have a manufacturing client who has taken up a lot of my time, and through representing him and his firm, he has 250 employees or whatever, I've expanded my practice into HR.
Oh, wow.
And certainly the retirement plans, we did different things with those. And, it's sort of like a family office that we have become for his operation and his, generation as he passes his business on to the next generation. So that's what we want to do is our clients, as I tell people that walk in, maybe a financial planner or something that wants to see if they can work with us, if we're a good fit. I say, with financial planners, our job will make you look good, but really we're the kind of law firm where our clients leave hugging us. We have a good time with our clients. They become our best friends.
That's wonderful.
So I didn't really answer your question what I do every day. Yeah, I still work every day. I get that question
well, let me ask you this. So I will tell, because I know you, I will tell our listeners that Brenda has a business that essentially covers just about every aspect you could need as a business owner, as well as estate planning. So it's just a full circle business is the way I refer to stuff like that. So let me ask you this. Let's get into a personal standpoint. Let's talk estate planning. If I could ask you, what is the best piece of advice when it comes to estate planning that you could make a recommendation to our listeners? Because it's not something that is common as it needs to be, in my opinion, and I bet you would probably agree, because there's a lot of people that, they leave their family exposed, when an untimely death comes. So what is your recommendation
probably,
there?
One line that I have found to be needed, that people need to hear, is do not leave your family with a moral obligation. Leave them with a legal obligation. For example, I had a client who said, my mom lives in Florida. I have 5 siblings, and she just redid her estate plan, and she left everything to me, and I'm supposed to divide it up equally among my siblings. Sure. What could be worse than that? And I'm sitting there, I said, Mary, let's talk about worst case scenario. You have a stroke, you're incapacitated. We set up a guardianship, which would be required. Your husband, Frank, over here, has all these assets you've inherited from your mother. And, what is he going to do with them? He can't give them to your siblings. And, you can't always accommodate a moral obligation. And then, you'll have family situations where maybe the favored daughter who would take care of everything dies in a car accident before she divides up the property. And she's got everything in her bank account, and the husband goes, okay, I'm supposed to divide this up. And, it's going to cost him tax-wise to make these gifts if he does that. And then the bank goes, oh, no, that's your money. Or he goes to the lawyer, and the lawyer goes, hey, the law says this is your money, so, Sam, I'm sorry. This is not your in-laws that you really hate. So, don't leave your family with a moral obligation. Leave them with a legal obligation.
I like that. Okay. So we've covered the history and of from start personal life to now transition in a little bit of your in a nutshell history of your career. Let's transition to another part of Brenda's life. So you and Joe Maynard are the people that have spearheaded the Conduit organizations, Conduit News and Conduit for Commerce, amongst a few others. Why don't we get off into that? So what is Conduit? Why was it started?
Okay, good legitimate question. My kids would certainly say, if they want to define Conduit, they would say distraction from the business. And maybe Joe's family would say the same thing. Certainly we put a lot of time in it, more than we probably envisioned initially. But as we, looked at what was going on in the country, I'm up here working, and he's a client, an estate planning and business client. And as you do, like I told you, my clients become friends, and we talk about, the events of the day and even political. And I remember George Bush was up here.
W?
Okay. At the airport, you can go see him. And so I show up, I'm there, I'm, cheering him on. As I may, in hindsight, hopefully my kids don't hear this report, but things are different now, we'll say. But anyhow, there's Maynard, at this event. I'm going, what is he doing here? And it was funny. So that was the first time I thought, well, we've talked a little bit about politics. Maybe he is a little bit interested. So we would discuss things, and we started. I wanted to do business. I like to teach people things. I've been teaching since I can remember.
Right.
And I thought it would be good to teach women how to do better business. And so one of the first seminars I did when I came to Northwest Arkansas, and it was quite a detailed seminar, is asset protection for professional women. And it's probably something they still need, but I would, go through the whole gamut of what all you need to make sure that you do to protect your assets as you work. And, anyhow, it's a good seminar. I have it for farmers, because I have a lot of farm clients, and naturally. And so with Joe, I said, anything you might help me with as I teach these women how to do business better? Because we being Brenda and my friends at the university, had started Ag for Women. Addison, my son, who came up here and me following him, he had ag business degree, and he had met professors there. I became friends as a result of him, and so I helped them set up that nonprofit, women agricultural organization nonprofit. And so I'm going to teach these women how to do business better. And so, Joe, do you know anything about business? Oh, well, I saw you did an interview with him. Of course, he can tell you he knows about business. Yeah. And so that was kind of our start on working together and seeing how our minds meshed to do that. And then I saw that underneath his facade, there was a lot more depth there that you might skim off the surface when you first meet him. And so anyhow, as we started growing something politically, we start trying to analyze what's going on politically. And as we got in deeper, we saw that the best place, if we wanted to quit talking about making things better for our children, our grandchildren, from a political perspective, we needed to stop talking and do something. So Conduit was our doing something. And I had introduced Joe to the Heritage Foundation. We go to this event in D.C., and he gets up to go do something. They come out, they're rolling out their new program, the Heritage for Action. And so while he was gone in that 2-minute period, I took my idea for Conduit for Commerce, or our idea for a nonprofit think tank patterned after the Heritage Foundation, to add on the Conduit for Action piece, which would allow us to lobby, become lobbyists, and really help teach our Arkansas legislators what small business needs. So really our focus, as we honed it in and looked at our skill set, our knowledge, and what Arkansas needed, or what our country needed, was to shore up the strength of the states. We decided to work at the state level, and the best place we could enter that would be through small business, because that's what we both knew about. And we feel like that small business is the economic engine of the state, not government dollars. I know there's a battle going on maybe with some people, or even here in Northwest Arkansas, unbelievable, we still think it's small business rather than, and I know that, a Walmart, Tyson, that's the heart of what's going on here, but still small business is important. And so we wanted to help legislators learn in Arkansas what good small business policy looks like. Now, that was our idea. So we have a nonprofit. We have a 501c4 that's not tax deductible, but can lobby. And so we add to that. We find out pretty quickly that if you can't help elect and unelect legislators, they really don't care what you have to offer, how much education, and I love them. I say that most kindly, but, we were in deep enough to learn that. So we set up the PACs. We have Commerce in Action, which meant the business people come together, pool their money, and put it to action through PACs, supporting candidates that they were like-minded, or they were like-minded. We added to that a nonprofit, Arkansas Economic Defense Fund, which was a lawyer piece, and those are young lawyers initially that came together. We still have that organization where we can do legal work to help people.
Awesome.
So that's what we did.
Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of Conduit. Okay. The name Conduit doesn't always have favor with some of the Arkansas legislators. Okay. Why is that?
We've had a lot of people, including Tim Griffin. I'm not trying to name drop. I'm just saying names that people will recognize, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't think saying Tim Griffin is necessarily considered a name dropper. But anyhow, some circles maybe. Yeah. Y'all just need to change that name, Brenda. That's a terrible name. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you're making that comment because that's a terrible name. Who's ever heard of Conduit? You may have another reason you're saying that. I think you're maybe making a statement more as to the brand, which we discussed with your business.
Yeah. So let me say this. So in certain, and we don't have to get off into the extreme details, but you have created a rub with some of Arkansas's politicians. So in your opinion, why is there a rub?
Okay, legitimate question. If you think about it, you've heard my story. Mm-hmm. You know that I am an absolute nobody. You can go to Joe's interview. Very well done. I watched it today, and I recommend. And let me go ahead and put a parenthesis in. I really like what you're doing, Matt. That was part of what I had hoped that Conduit would be able to do. We had a wonderful radio host, Paul Harrell. And, I thought interviewing, my idea was business people because our organization is small business focused. But it's great to give people an opportunity to tell their story so that others might learn something. I don't know. But thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
But it's almost laughable to think what you just said, that Conduit would have a negative reputation across the state, that anybody would even know who we are. I mean, we're just nobody, two people.
I don't. So being a guy that's been heavily involved in politics for years, I'm just going to come out and say it how I see it. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So here's the reality. So we understand that you are a conservative, and Joe Maynard is a conservative, and it is an organization that's run by conservatives, yet we find situations where other conservatives don't like what they see sometimes come out of Conduit. And this is how I'll say this. You guys, I've always seen you guys as a watchdog for the people. And whether you like it or not, sometimes the people that we elect they're not as forthcoming as we'd like them to be. And sometimes there's situations where, honestly, for the average guy like myself, the legislation gets a little complicated, And what I've appreciated with Conduit over the years is that you guys have been able to basically call bull on certain things that you see that go against Republican Party principles, and or expose more layers of the onion of some of the legislation that's being pushed through Arkansas, because we are all aware that sometimes you get the headline news, or you get a bill that sounds good just because it's worded it's worded in such a way that it seems like it's a great thing, but you don't always see really what's going on in its entirety. And I will give you guys I can't tell people enough, you guys have been good about showing transparency. And I think that's where the rub might getting to the point of what all I'm talking about here. The rub is that I think you guys expose things for what they truly are, and people don't like that sometimes. Would you agree with me in saying that may be the rub that some people see in Arkansas?
We started this openly and aggressively in 2011, and Obama care and all that had just hit, and B.B. had just barely gotten past the Medicaid expansion. And so 2014, the public, the citizens in the state were not for it. It was going to grow government 20%. Wow. Now, our whole entire, how do you make government better for the people? And we have one conclusion, and we've not changed in all these years, and that is to reduce the size of government. And the only way you can do that is to reduce the amount of money that government controls. Your freedom is directly proportional. I believe that economic freedom is the most important way to preserve all of your freedoms. When you lose your economic freedom as an individual, you have the threat to lose all of your freedoms. They're tied to you being in control of keeping what your efforts produce. The more that you lose, if the government gains that, and it's only a few cents on the dollar that we've increased the tax, but do that multiplied by how many dollars there are, how many people, it is exponentially large in growth. As the government grows, then the people's freedoms shrink. They're directly proportional in that formula. And so when we say we want smaller government, Obamacare is going to expand it 2014, and we've decided to go out and help people get elected. It was kind of amazing how many people we helped beat Democrats at that time, and it just a huge number. And if you recall, that's when Asa Hutchinson also was elected governor. He stood kind of on the fence. He didn't really, make it clear. You could read between the lines if you wanted to where he stood on Medicaid expansion. But it was clear that the senators and House members that we helped get elected, it was because they were against Obamacare and against that expansion of government. We lost that battle. And we lost it in January of 2015 because Asa Hutchinson calls me on my cell phone that day and says, if you don't support my bill to expand Medicaid and take our private option was the name of it at that point in time, and if you don't vote for my tax increase, which he was reversing a capital gains tax cut that had been passed the year before, if you don't support that, you'll never accomplish another thing in this Little Rock Capitol. He kept his promise. He's very effective. What we watched happen, not understanding the power of a governor, because we're very naive, we'd just been at this a short period of time, he took those people that we had just helped get elected, stood out in the rain, holding signs, literally, Joe and me, ourselves, beating, one of the most popular Democrats across the state at that time with Blake Johnson's race. For example, Scott Flippo beating the most powerful, supposedly John Burris, who's now should send us a thank you note every other day for he's now, a successful lobbyist as opposed to a state senator. But we helped those guys, like that, get in office. And then we watched them turn toward the governor and mind his bidding as opposed to what they promised the voters who elected them and the positions on which they were elected. And so we've seen that enough that, our organization says, this is how they vote. These are the bills. This is the scorecard. Now, this is how we think the should have been. We sent out a memo the week before. This is what the bill says. Our position for a conservative analysis, this is a bad bill or a good bill. And we have a sort of a test, economic freedom filter, we call it. There's a bill, what does it do? Try not to make this very hard for the legislators. And we score those votes at the end of every session of the regular sessions, and then we post those scores. We also compare their votes to the Republican platform. To me, the platform is to represent what Republicans stand for. If someone's going to think, am I going to be a Republican or a Democrat? Well, what do you stand for? Well, here's our platform if you want to know what Republicans stand for. So when a legislator does not vote consistent with that platform, that's fine if the voters want to keep them, but Conduit is going to relay that message. And so we have our heroes of the platform, and we have those who are not heroes. Legislators have become hostile to that idea because it is transparency, but there are a lot of legislators who really do like us.
No, absolutely.
And, we understand the game and the way it's played, and it is, unfortunately, some think it's a game, but we are trying to help people get informed, and, we're happy if we do all these interviews. We have Conduit News, as you mentioned, to reach out and educate people and wait for them to listen, just be interviewed and that kind of thing. And everybody's not happy for their voters to know what they're doing. Now, if someone disagrees with us, obviously we've had disagreements. And, I remember fairly recently someone who's been a friend of ours, friend of my son's, stand up and while Joe and I are not at a meeting to accuse us of some being, very bad people. And, and then you ask them about it. Oh, I didn't say that. Well, unfortunately, I have it on tape, So sometimes people are busted. They don't necessarily like it. And then as a result, they dislike you more. So, I mean, where do you go?
Well, I think I'll say this. So it doesn't really matter what side of the aisle you're on. And, that is the beauty of the United States, is that we do have choices. Thank God for that. But I will say I love what you guys have done, because you make it easy. You take out the guesswork for being able to see the transparency. I do love the scorecard, because I can look in one spot and I can say, okay, these are issues that are important to me. How are the legislators really voting? And, it's easy to look at, it's easy to understand, and, you don't always get that. And why any legislator would not want their, the people that put them in office to see that is beyond me. But I love that even more, because we could all use a little honesty. Whether you like it or not, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, you see in honest format what's really going on. And I think anybody can appreciate that. Not everyone does, I'm sure, but I can tell you as a voter, I do. So thank you. Thank you guys for doing that.
Well, thank you.
Brenda, there's so much more that I would love to talk about, but we're past our time, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you'll come on again.
Yeah, I love it.
Excellent. So we'll schedule another time, and thank you again for being here.
All right. Thanks a lot.